Venice. To the rest of the world, it's the city of romance. Gondolas sliding through black water, marble palaces glowing at sunset, and couples kissing beneath ancient bridges. But if you talk to the locals, the ones whose families have lived here for generations, they'll tell you something else. They'll tell you to look away from the lagoon. They'll tell you that just 2 miles from the postcard version of Venice, there's a place the government has officially declared off-limits. No tourists, no fishing, no curious explorers. Welcome to Poveglia, a small island with a reputation so dark that some Venetian fishermen won't even cast their nets near its shoreline because they're afraid of what they might pull up. Locals whisper that the soil is mixed with human ash, that bones still surface after storms, that the past here never fully settled into silence. And whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is absolutely true. This isn't just a scary story. This is a historical crime scene, one that stretches across centuries. And to understand why Poveglia became a nightmare, we have to go back to the moment Venice decided that one island could be sacrificed to protect an entire city. Poveglia's nightmare didn't begin with ghosts. It began with disease. In the 1300s, the Black Death ripped through Europe like a scythe. Entire towns vanished. Whole families were erased in a matter of days. And Venice, one of the richest trade hubs on Earth, was uniquely vulnerable. Ships from across the Mediterranean arrived daily. Cargo, spices, silk, gold, and hidden among it, rats, fleas, infection. Venice was a city built on water, but it was also a city built on movement, and plague moves faster than commerce. So the Venetian government did something revolutionary for its time. They created quarantine. The very word quarantine comes from the Italian quaranta, meaning 40, because ships suspected of carrying disease were held for 40 days before anyone was allowed to enter the city. And Venice didn't just quarantine ships, they quarantined people. They created islands called lazarettos, quarantine stations, where the sick were sent away from the living. Poveglia became one of those islands. But let's be honest, for the people who were taken there, it didn't feel like medicine, it felt like exile. If you showed the slightest symptom, a cough, a fever, a swollen gland, you could be seized from your home and forced onto a boat. No appeals, no second opinions, no goodbyes. Imagine that moment. You're sitting in a small wooden boat. The oars creak. The lagoon water slaps softly against the hull. And in the distance, you can still see Venice glowing, beautiful, alive, untouchable. And you know you're never going back. Because on Poveglia, there weren't doctors waiting to save you. There were pits. Massive trenches where the dead were dumped, not buried carefully, not mourned, tossed, like the city was throwing its sickness into the sea. During the worst waves of plague, bodies were burned in large fires, partly out of desperation, partly out of fear. And over time, the island became layered with tragedy. How many people died here? No one knows the exact number. Some estimates are modest, some are enormous. But even historians agree on the core truth. Thousands upon thousands passed through this island, and many never left. And that's where the legend begins. Because when generations grow up hearing that a place was used as a mass grave, the imagination does the rest. They say the soil isn't soil anymore. They say it's something else, an island made of ash. For centuries after the plague years, Poveglia sat quiet, a forgotten patch of land in the lagoon, a place that wasn't worth building on, because even if the disease faded, the stigma didn't. Venice is a city obsessed with beauty, tradition, and image, and Poveglia was the opposite. It was the city's shadow. And yet, history has a strange habit. It doesn't just bury the past, it builds on top of it. In the early 1900s, Italy changed, Europe changed, and medicine changed, but not always for the better. In 1922, the Italian government established a psychiatric hospital on Poveglia, a mental institution, an asylum. And if that word makes you picture clean hallways and gentle care, erase it. Because mental health treatment in the 1920s was often brutal, even in the best hospitals. Patients were routinely isolated, sedated, restrained. Therapies were experimental, and on Poveglia, the isolation wasn't just emotional, it was physical. The asylum sat surrounded by water, cut off from the world. And that meant something terrifying. There was no oversight, no families visiting daily, no journalists wandering the halls, no one hearing what happened after dark. And that's where the island's second nightmare begins. Patients started claiming they saw figures in the corridors. They described faces at windows. They said the walls whispered. Now, from a modern perspective, you can explain this in a dozen ways. Trauma, illness, fear, isolation. But in a place like Poveglia, those explanations don't make the stories feel less disturbing. Because the patients weren't just seeing ghosts, they were living on top of a mass grave, and the island itself already had a reputation. So when people started hearing that screams echoed from the old bell tower, the legend didn't just grow, it mutated.
This is the chapter where Poveglia stops feeling like history and starts feeling like a horror film. Because if you ask Venetians today what they've heard about Poveglia, they won't start with the plague. They'll start with the doctor, the mad doctor. Now here's the truth. Much of this story lives in rumor, local retellings, and fragmented accounts, not in neat official records. But legends don't need paperwork to survive. They survive because people believe them. The story goes like this. A doctor working at the asylum became obsessed with the human mind. He believed madness wasn't just illness, it was something you could carve out. And in the early 20th century, one procedure became infamous across the world, the lobotomy, a surgery meant to cure mental illness by severing connections in the brain. It was performed in hospitals, it was praised by some doctors, and it ruined countless lives. But on Poveglia, the legend says the doctor didn't perform lobotomies with clean surgical instruments. He used crude tools, hand drills, hammers, chisels. The story claims he took patients up into the bell tower, and that's the part that chills people. Because if you stand in Venice on a quiet evening, you can see that tower from across the water. A tall, decaying silhouette, like a finger pointing up from the grave. Imagine being a patient in that asylum. You're lying in a bed, the sheets smell like salt and damp stone, and somewhere above you, you hear it, a muffled scream, and then a dull, rhythmic sound. Thud, thud, thud. Whether that really happened or not, the island became a magnet for fear. And then comes the ending. The part every version of the legend agrees on. The doctor went mad. Some say he began seeing figures himself. Some say he heard voices. Some say the island turned on him, and one night he climbed the bell tower and jumped. A final fall, a final silence. And then the asylum eventually shut down, not because of ghosts, but because the institution was outdated, the facility was decaying, and Italy was moving forward. By 1968, Poveglia was abandoned, and the island was left behind,
with all of its stories still trapped inside. Since the asylum closed, Poveglia has become a ghost town. No residents, no electricity, no maintenance, just stone, rot, and silence. The Italian government has tried repeatedly to sell it, lease it, redevelop it, turn it into something profitable, a hotel, a resort, a private property, but every attempt collapses. Investors arrive, walk the ruins, and leave, not always because they believe in ghosts, sometimes because the practical reality is terrifying enough. Salt water destroys brick and mortar, vegetation chokes pathways, buildings collapse without warning. And then there's the fact that even if you could restore it, who wants to sleep on top of a plague graveyard? In 2014, a businessman reportedly attempted to acquire a lease for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The plan never became reality, and the island remained what it has always been, a place that refuses to rejoin the modern world. If you walked through it today, you'd find remnants of the asylum, rusting metal frames, broken windows, tiles cracked by decades of weather. You'd find old hydrotherapy tubs where patients were once submerged in cold water as treatment. You'd find medical rooms stripped bare, but still heavy with atmosphere. And if you walked far enough, you'd find places where the earth has eroded, where fragments of bone have reportedly been uncovered. Not dramatic skeletons, not movie props, just small reminders that this island's history isn't a metaphor, it's literal. So why do we care about a tiny, rotting island in Italy? Because Poveglia is more than a ghost story. It's a mirror. It shows us what societies do when fear takes control, when the sick become dangerous, when the mentally ill become inconvenient, when human beings become problems to be moved somewhere else. Poveglia was never meant to be a place of healing. It was meant to be a place of removal, a place where the unwanted could disappear. And that's the real horror. Not the tower, not the mist, not the whispers. The real horror is that this happened in the heart of one of the most beautiful cities on Earth. Venice might be the city of love, but Poveglia is the city of truth. And the truth is, some places aren't haunted by spirits. They're haunted by what people did there. Poveglia isn't just an island of ghosts, it's an island of ash, a place layered with centuries of death, fear, and silence. The lagoon can wash the stone, the sun can warm the ruins, but it can't erase what the island became. And maybe that's why it still feels forbidden, because deep down we know something. History doesn't disappear, it waits. It settles into the soil, and sometimes it rises again in the stories we tell. So here's the question. If you had the chance to spend one night on Poveglia, would you take it? Or do you think some places should remain off limits for a reason? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more vanished worlds and hidden secrets brought back to life, make sure to subscribe to Rewritten Realities. Until next time, watch your step. You never know what's buried beneath.